members of the Citizens' Army, I want to thank you for your courage, your spirit, your discipline, and your commitment to the cause. It has been an honor to serve with you.
Step down, mate.
Tranona dé Downing an trochu láda brán mille negéid a sédéag. Balíag li chéile na rebelúnathe dearnacha a dhéal san éirí amach, agus tugad go barach Richmond iad. I rinne caiicí sé na dhé sin, chuir fí chuireach na dhéag coch an báis faoi lách na beléir I bríosún Kilmainham. Bhí lámhigh seachtar den na féran na más hain nuair a híine siad forógra phoblach na héireann. Ach níl na cúisna faoinar chuireg an seachtar eile chun báis chomh soléir céine. Bhí aithne bha I gais lán bhliaach lia cuideacha. Bhí ró lárnach daoine eile sa chá. Le gás na áirithe, bhí impreacht na Breataine I buin díalta semach hana naide. Agus bhí daoine eile nach raibh smacht ar bithach ar an scéal, ach a bhí páirteach ar aon nós. Díach an seachtar fearr seo an praghas is airde as buntlach na saoirse a leagan, agus dá róch an más, scéal agus dán na héireann go deo.
Rugab Michael Mallin in 1864 imlát lías na Saoirse. Bhí sé caitínta go maith ag daoine imlát lí a ghulisteach san airm ar waithile stíomheatháil de bhar bochtanis go minic. I gás Michael Mallin áfach is cosúil gur tradiisiún Windsore ba chúis leis. Thaobh bháthair bhí go leor daoine in airm na Breataine. Agus thug antín leis Michael cuairt chorach chealdara nuair bhí sé cheithre bliana dé ghís. Agus chua banna ceol an airm go mórmór I bhaimir, agus heasta bhaid héin a bheith pársach san obair seo. Agus mar sin listáil sé a bhiú soléirí riaga na Halabun.
Cé go raibh na tistí in na poblatánig, deirtear go raibh gur minic an trid a bheith idir é héin agus a athair agus iad ag caint faoi eile héad de rud. Athair ba náisiúna é, agus a bháthair bhí sí antugad don náisiún agus. Cé go raibh gaolta ag I féin idir Harracha in Aran Sasna sa Royal Scots Fusiliers, Bertar Haran sin. Now, to be sé Saxon Aran, mar Dromador na Buchel de Romé. Bhí déistin ar a bhar, bhí sé anfarracha, go dúirt sé, look, just as amagam sa banna ceol. Ní chun tréide san Sasna agus san Aran, ach chun bheith mar Dromador go fes sa banna ceol.
For the first number of years that he was in the Royal Scots Fusiliers, they were stationed primarily in Ireland and England. But in 1896, the battalion, the 1st Battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers was sent to India. India was part of the British Empire at this time.
Right turn. Quick march.
Bhí cineál éirí amach ar bun san Ind ag deire a 1910 ag gantar tíre. Bhí an pobl sin I mún ceanarcha an aarm na Breataine ag ar a deire chuir le rial na Breataine ar a tír. Agus ba chogad é nach raibh ar na Breataine in an nach chuid leachta air. Seachas an chogaíocht fudamáilta effigiúil banós lob siúd. Bhí na daoine ag ar a prod ar bhealach a del go péin seachas garam na Breataine.
Agus bhí Mallin sáirte isteach an seo. Agus de chunig sé ag an am seo, cé có táhachtach is a bhí sé, ólas a bheith agat ar an dúí margúirt, local knowledge mar íortha. Guerrilla warfare don chéadúir, chunig sé an seo hé.
The terrain was very difficult. It was unsuitable for regular troops, and the native tribes used that to their advantage. They would draw the army into areas, particularly dried up waterways, and they would draw them into these areas and then they would attack and run. So it was essentially, to a large extent, hit and run tactics. they would inflict very heavy casualties and then be able to escape. They had the advantage of knowing the terrain intimately, which the British Army or which the regular soldiers didn't.
On the hill, one to the hill!
Mallin's only period of active service in India was during the Tirah campaign, and that was a campaign primarily again based in the north of India. He only really describes one battle in any sort of detail, and that was one in Ublan Pass. Just after the battle at Ublan Pass, Mallin was forced to sleep outside of his tent for security reasons, and during that night he seems to have contracted malaria. And he suffered regular recurrences and regular bouts of this illness throughout his time, and he was hospitalised on a number of occasions during his time in India.
Is as na litrucha a scríomh Mallin chuig Colleen an Éireann a hagan formhór an ólis atá going faoin sealach is an Ind. Agnes Hickey an tanam a bhíorthaí, agus fósach Mallinaí tamalaní éisin.
Nor a bhí sé san Ind, de scrí sé chuig Agnes Hickey gach ilimi gan tep a fa so cebéad blianta agus sin an bailachan a cumad ar dangwal I chéile.
My Colleen Jas, I was lying in hospital when your loving letter came to me last week and I could not write. I am still in hospital, but well and strong again. This is the worst attack I have had in the country. I have fever and a touch of ague. I may have to go back to the front, but I don't think so. If I do, I shall let you know. The war is lasting a very long time, dear. We ought to leave the poor people alone, for I am sure they will never give in, and they have proved brave men. God help them.
On the letzrocha I scríomh Mallin on Inns a while is cosol gurrasession ag airí báúil le muinte na hinsa seachas le arm na Bratainna.
Mallin would have come to consider the British campaign in India as an unjust one that was there really to take advantage of the natives. For example, much later on he wrote about an attempt by the British Army to collect a tax that they'd imposed on a native tribe by force.
If I were not a soldier, I would be out fighting for them. I wish it was for Éireann I was fighting, and not against these poor people. The British Army is a hell on earth. It is the likes of me that keeps mine and your country down. If ever I am to die by bayonet or bullet, I hope it is against it for Ireland. A day will come when we will be able to pay England back with interest all she has done to us. This is the last letter I write to you from India. I will be home a few days after it myself.
Dil Mallin ar Éireann sa bhliain 1902, tar éis 3 bliana déag a bheith caiteige in arm na Bratainna. Fós sé Agnes Hickey, ban a bheith cúgar cluineig a leithí. Agus fuair sé obair mleat lia mar iador siada chun an teileach a chanála gemacht.
So tháinig sé as níd go 2, agus de fós sé Agnes in níd go 3, agus der huidir go Wellington Street, mas gan bíad cónaí dosach. Agus the Wellington Street in a Roma achar na bhí sé mar bobbín.
Tell you what, this will change things, Agnes, I'm telling you. Let us then, with glad eyes, face the future. That's what I want to hear. Ireland salutes the rising sun. And within Ireland, Labour moves with the promise and potency of growing life and consciousness.
Mallin's first involvement in trade unionism was with the Silk Weavers Trade Union. Shortly after getting married, he began working as a silk weaver in Messrs Atkinson & Co. Poplin Weavers in Hanbury Lane. Trade unionism was on the cusp of a big boom. James Larkin soon after founded the Irish Transport and General Workers Union.
Michael Mallin in a Rooney chearchuman na bhíodóirí am lá clia. Ach san am seo bhí fás mór a tíocht faoin gearchumanachas, agus cearchumanachas níos radachaí ag daoine mar Seamus Ó Lorcan agus Seamus Ó Conghaile.
Peter, is that the last load of the day?
It is, yeah, sure.
It's 1 o'clock out now.
I will.
Okay, tell you what, here, let's check this. Yeah, we got to get to Liberty Hall. Take about 20 minutes, all right? Come on. I think Connolly's going to be speaking at this night. Yeah.
The great appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise!
The Socialist Party of Ireland was very much connected to the trade union movement in Dublin. And there's no doubt, but for Mallin, his entry point into the Socialist Party was through the trade union movement, first of all through the secretary of the Silk Weavers Union, but also through his engagement with the Dublin Trades Council. Many members of the Socialist Party of Ireland were also involved in the Dublin Trades Council, and that's particularly important, I suppose, in terms of his later connection with James Connolly, because James Connolly was probably the most prominent personality in the Socialist Party of Ireland from 1910 onwards, after his return to Ireland from the United States.
Since the general exodus from the Union, after our good friend Jim Larkin left the city of Belfast, the exploiters of labour have piled outrage upon outrage and iniquity upon iniquity until every man in the port with a spark of manhood left was ripe for rebellion. It required a spark to ignite the magazine. That spark came in the fullness of time.
The Mallin an áit an Russia gobar Atkinson's an slíana naibroch so an sin ná is like piecework of Ian. Diach for the rare a made siad a churchú amach. An deacrach a bhí an sin ná go méoch ar an fiad ar fannacht go dtí go bhuiach sé an bun ábhar agus níor íochagé ar bhí sé fannacht. Agus thar sin bhí ar cias íoch the Atkinson's tusk an spás bhí agus mar sin de. So bhí Mallin na glóir sais galóns go méoch ar a líad bunpáid agus faoihearra Harla Stalchan sin.
Let your readers know that the strike of weavers at Atkinson's Poplin factory is nowhere near settlement, and that the meaning of the notice...
The strike initially was about the underemployment of the weavers, but by April the employers decided to take a more aggressive approach to the trade union, and they offered re-employment, reinstatement to the trade union workers on the old terms, but they also offered the apprentices increased wages. The difficulty with that, obviously, was for the silk weavers, was that this would change the terms of their employment dramatically, and they refused to go back to work.
Keep your bribe. We want none of it. The journeymen weavers are out for the sake of our future, the future of us apprentices. We are the journeymen of tomorrow. Do you think we're going to sell our souls for 30 pieces of silver? That is the spirit of our apprentices.
However, the employers then, from the 9th of April onwards, began to employ scab labour, in other words, non-unionised labour, and this outraged the Silk Weavers Union. So from there on, until the strike ended in June 1913, the strike was one of principle as well as one around the issue of underemployment.
Lads, listen up.
Don Mallin agus na hubblirí eile ar stalc ar feicéirí bhí. Sa deire, Yale Atkinson dá Guidéileh, agus daontaigh na fiadóirí fille ar an obair. Achas bua beag a bhí stalc Atkinson, a gomparáid leis an goga a bhí á rid, idir na cumann saithir agus fustóirí bhlear clia. Coga inar tháinig an crúr an táirne nuair a tharla lockout na bliana 1930.
The 1913 lockout was quite a polarised industrial dispute, and there was a great degree of violence. That the police were seen to be quite brutal at the time. There was a famous episode on the 31st of August when the police quite viciously attacked strikers and their supporters on O'Connell Street in Dublin. But there were other episodes of violence as well, from both the strikers and from people that continue to work and from strike breakers.
But hilaire the Larkin agus Connolly agus Dini Ella Nachiad. Nacro Nyarth and the Sroide, ag the fair. You know, there are unsig Napolini, di rather non Tritarash. So, Agardi Amakasha, Ker Larkin agus Connolly agus Farla Bound of the Fuitche, Aram Carga the Hearn Lekela, Con Tridge or son Iberha. Now, Nero Guniaka just come on, no Bathy agus Marshin there. Just con Vaun con Tridge here, da Meach Galish.
Bhí siopa ag Mallin in 1930 agus I measc go goid coslimeri bhí rint Pólíní a cháil sé na costameri seo le lín na sailce. Is cosol gur a cuid na Pólíní seo I muochtdal lá as an unsaí a bhí zéantacha bar stailceoirí agus gur thug Mallin le fis gur a sesin ar héad na stailceoirí agus nach ra ein dhéanaig ar bhrúdúlach na Pólíní.
Siop tabak agus Michelin rudí mar sin. Now, bhí an sonna acunar bhí a fartha ceithre bliana I sráid na mí, agus bíad na bliana is sonna a bhí ag clán, Michael Mallin. Agus an sin níos sin de hosig an stailcmód a bhí rang goí 1930.
Fuim líon 1930, bhí post Mallin sa bhannacha siada caite san éirige, agus bhra sé ar bhrabús an teopach an marachtáil. A chuir an lockout isteach go mór ar an gnó, agus bhí ar Mallin an siopa ar ráid na mí a díal. Thart ar nám seo freisin, bhfuil droch hinnas Mallin, agus chuirg na planana bhí aige don todhchaí I le taobh.
Bhí ar an ein targad a fuisiid ó dílú an tach I sráid na mí, bhí ar sin na cafe doctóí agus mar sin. In fact, bhí sé bail báise an am.
Mr. Mallin. Mr. Conley. What are you doing here? Please, take a seat. Thank you.
How's the health?
Fine fettle. Fine fettle. What can I do for you?
You served in the British Army, didn't you?
Yes. I hated it.
Well, that's something I have in common. But many a good man served in the British Army. There's nothing wrong with being well trained. It's knowing when to get out and use that knowledge to the advantage of your country. That's what I call makes a good soldier.
If a day comes where we can pay England back with interest for all she's done to us, I hope I am alive to help pay it.
I can always guarantee that the citizen army will fight. But I cannot guarantee that they will be on time for such a fight, should it take place. I need someone to knock them into shape. Put some discipline and fight back into them. I want you to take over the citizen army.
James Conley appointed Michael Mallin as Chief of Staff of the Irish Citizen Army in October 1914. Conley and Mallin worked very closely together to change the ethos of the Citizen Army, and they were quite interested in preparing the Citizen Army for guerrilla warfare, for the possibility of insurrection. So during 1915 in particular, both Conley and Mallin gave many lectures and they wrote articles for the Workers' Republic.
Agus ins na leachtaí a thug sé den ICA, tá sé sa léir gúil sé rá local knowledge, sin an rud a chaithí a bhagat. Ma hénta bhí tríide gunnamh arm for Malta ar nós arm sásna, is na catharcha. No, fiúháin sa dúi. Ní gáid seasamh suas in na gunnamh, ach úsáid a buint as an áit na bhfuil thú.
Now listen to me, boys. You have to start looking at the streets of this city through military eyes. Lanes and alleys are a great source of danger to regular troops. What's a street in military terms? A street is a defile, a narrow pass through which troops can only move by narrowing their front, making themselves a good target for the enemy. A mountain pass is a defile. A bridge over a river is a defile. A street is a defile.
Bhís na mulle trálchogaíocht, go bhfuil dís buntáiste áil rá arm mar a bhí an arm na Breataine, agus a gaí sin an tólas a bhíacha ar a gahar an takeíocht a bhíacha be meas muinte na carach a chuir chun leasa go péin, agus bhí Mallin a tarins go sonrach a haí on ins nuair a chonig sé dína san ins a rinne cogaíocht an torsin an arm na Breataine.
When I was in India, I was sent to fight against some of the finest guerrilla fighters in the world. For over 6 months, a handful of poorly equipped tribesmen kept a whole regiment of British troops at bay. They compensated for a lack of arms and manpower by employing strategy and ingenuity.
Squad! Halt! Right turn!
When the time to fight comes, and believe me, it is coming, the real dangerous fighting will be done by small irregular bodies, hastily dividing, using anything capable of killing or wounding that lies ready to their hand. Boys, when we fight to win.
Mallin was quite heavily involved in securing rifles for the Citizen Army. He seems to have had quite a talent for coaxing rifles out of British soldiers. And when the family moved into the Emmett Hall in Seachtar, it had the benefit of being adjacent to Richmond Barracks. So the back wall of Emmett Hall was actually part of Richmond Barracks, and he seems to have spent a lot of time at the back wall of his house having rifles passed over the wall.
Ready? Aim! Fire!
Every person who joins the Citizen Army has to give a commitment that when they join, they accept that one day they will go into battle. Now, it's not a huge force, of course. By 1916, it's still only got about 320 people in it, men and women. But he ensures that by 1916, everyone has a rifle.
The Citizen Army was unusual in the sense that it welcomed women with open arms. Now, that was completely in line with Connolly's views. Connolly was quite strong on the issue of women's liberation and equality for women. And in that sense, it held true for the Citizen Army. The most prominent female member of the Citizen Army, I suppose, was Countess Markievicz, who joined at the beginning. She faced quite a degree of opposition. Countess Markievicz was unlike most of the volunteers in the Citizen Army. To begin with, she was from the landed gentry, whereas most of the ordinary members of the Citizen Army were from working-class Dublin, from the slums. In addition, she was suspected by some leading members of the Citizen Army of being too closely aligned with the Irish Volunteers. She had formed Na Fianna Éireann, which was allied to the Republican movement, and there were those that thought she was a spy for the Irish Volunteers.
Well, go luath tar éis den chéad chugad an do bris nach pas gan IRB I cuiineh airí amach. Agus de ré mar bhí an plan seo á orbert ag an IRB, bhí sé de gairí imní faoi James Connolly. Bhí Connolly anna oscailte faoin tuairim gur chóir airí amach a chur siúil go lua, as chuir sé sin imní ar an IRB. Mar dá an aireoch sé amach, is beag seans a bhí ann go mbeadh an bua aige, tá sin raibh mór an fearige péis céala. Ach bheadh an bua lán go néanthach na húdaráis éine raibh áras ortha na héamh a choháil, agus sa tlí sin ní bheadh seans tálaid ag an IRB dul raig leis an plana bhí go féin. Mar sin bharrtaigh siad Connolly a thuirte le taobh labhart leis iarraigh ar gan bula raig leis an plana bhí go héin ach fannacht agus íireachta dhéanamh ina damta siúd.
Ar an 9 den áir 1960, tháinig an scéala chomh fada le Mallin agus Markievicz nach raibh tásc ná tuairisc ar James Connolly.
It's been suggested that he was kidnapped by the IRB, but it's equally possible that he could have met up with IRB members and was invited to a meeting of the IRB Military Council. And this quite worried both Michael Mallin and Countess Markievicz, because there was a fear, I suppose, initially that he'd been taken by British forces, and then there was a fear that he'd been taken by the Irish volunteers and that his life could be in danger.
Mr. Connolly.
Mr. Mallin. I've just spent the last 3 days with Mr. Pierce and his friends from the IRB. They're planning an insurrection.
For when?
Soon, possibly Easter. And, as we suspected, they want our support.
Do they have a plan? A military strategy? Is it doable?
A general occupation of strategic posts throughout the country, and in Dublin, the General Post Office, the four courts, St. Stephen's Green.
Mr. Connolly, with respect, this goes against everything we've trained the men for. The lectures, the drills, we're all centred on guerrilla warfare. An element of surprise. We don't have the manpower or the firepower to carry out this type of offensive.
On the other hand, you don't start a revolution with rifles. You start first and get your rifles after.
Daar inis Connolly do cad é an plan a bhí ann. Bhí uafásair nach rahamar dúirt sé plan B ann. Just plan amháin agus dúirt sé, tá sagin, a luas hosnaíon coga titan na plan nás a céile. Caithí plan B a bheith ann, ach ní rá plan B ann. Agus mar acamar, níos séanaí bin botún mór. Ach, hí Mallin ina haidir uilte agus a landse ordathe a gánaí.
Is dóid gur cheap Mallin nach raibh mór an seans ag go bua san éirí amach. Ní raibh sé róthástal leis an blána bhí le í síos gan éirí amach. Ach bhí sé ggéire is dói fód a heasa. Bhí sé ggéire seasa a dhéanana in éid aram agus imprucht na Breataine.
This war is the opportunity we've been waiting for. We should strike before the opportunity goes.
Le fad an lá, bhí sé daingean ina insin go mo cheart aram na Breataine a chuir amach as éireann, go mo cheart tíor hir a dhéanach a éireann. Agus má bhí trod le bheith ar siúl, bhí seis na gíre páirteach lecha an. Thug siad buil an aram isteach, agus chuir siad an iúl go raibh trod a tíocht agus go mo cheart go ulbó, agus an am sin géiríomh ar obair an aram, géiríomh ar an tréáil, ar an slóga, chuireamh agar níos ar fósorb, mar bhí sacab go raibh éireamach ar a meallach.
Mallin was a very committed family man, and you really do get a sense that he was quite devoted to his family, but he was also very committed to the idea of eradicating British rule by physical force means. And he does seem to have been the kind of person who, once he was committed to something, he was very committed to it, and he was willing to do what was necessary regardless of the consequences.
Got the guns? You got the money? Show us the gun.
Mother, sweet divine, what happened?
It's only a scratch. I've had worse. I need you to know this. That if things go bad, the Citizens' Army are going to take the fight to the Dublin mountains.
What about the children? And me? We need you, Michael.
I know, love. I know. But I'm also a soldier. And as a soldier, I have to carry out my duty.
Christmas delivered.
In the weeks leading up to the Rising, Mallin was quite heavily involved in the preparations, particularly around Liberty Hall. Liberty Hall was kind of the hub of activity. The Citizen Army spent the week prior to the Rising making homemade bombs and ammunition. The building was on constant armed guard as well, so Mallin would have been involved organising that.
Mallin himself, who has been allocated responsibility for Stephen's Green, he's out carrying out intense surveillance of the area around the Green and inside the Green itself. He's drawing up paperwork, he's looking for vantage points, and he's drawing maps, etc.
By Wednesday, the officers, or those who were to take commission as officers during the rebellion, were brought to James Connolly and Mallin, where they were told their roles and what was expected of them during the fighting.
Aréana chéasta ar díag do bhfuil arm chathartha cruinniúla chéile ag hallan na Saoirse ar an dónach. Ach le linn an deire seachtaine, úmpiaag pleanan na cóla mílete bunos ciún, nuair a gabhadh an lastas gunaí a heasta go géireótha amach ó hósta chiarí. Mar thora ar seo, dúird ag Eoin McNeill gníomhach daoine an óglach ar ghabhna cásca a chur ar ceall. Chuir sé seo deire le héan seans a bhí an tús a chur le réabhlóid náisiúnta.
It's only by word of mouth and people delivering messages, couriers, that word has got to a sufficient number of people that it's on, it's back on, get here. A higher proportion of the Citizen Army than the Irish Volunteers do turn out on the day, but it's not a full turnout by any means, and that has consequences.
Governor Mallin, what's the latest report?
Captain Allred hasn't reported for duty, sir.
Captain Houston, how many men have you got with you from your company?
About a dozen, sir, so far.
I want you to take them and to secure the Mendicity Institute on Usher's Island. I want you to occupy it for as long as it takes Commandant Daly to secure the forecourts. Do you understand me?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Kerrigan, Lynch, with me.
Members of the Citizens' Army, attention!
For the first time in 700 years, the flag of a free Ireland will fly over the city of Dublin. We are going out to break all connection between the British Empire and this country and to form an Irish Republic. There no longer exists the Citizen Army or the volunteer force. Instead, we are joined as brothers and sisters in the Irish Republican Army.
What's the meaning of this? What's going on? Halt! Get everybody out of the park. Hurry up and lock the gates. I want defensive barricades at every corner of the park. And tell the men to start entrenching. Go! Go!
Is cosol gur go leor bailí gur an tarm cachar níos daríre, gur siad olaf daoine a bharú chá magá. Bhí droch haithe go leorach go bhar Napóleon ag non-stalc, agus beidir fún díoltas ar chun an Obersac.
You have no business doing now! Poor host around in this fact!
Robbins! I want you to organise parties, to occupy the houses at every corner of the green. We need sharpshooters in any of the buildings that overlook our main defences. The Bank of Ireland, the Winter Palace at the corner, the Shelburne Hotel, and the College of Surgeons. Got that?
Yes, sir.
Go! Go!
I'll not take orders from the like of you.
Michael Kavanagh was an elderly guest of the Shelburne Hotel, and his cart of theatrical props was commandeered by the rebels, and he was warned on a number of occasions by rebels in the Green to leave it where it was. He ignored those warnings, and he was actually shot dead by the rebels.
Many of the Citizen Army volunteers were quite young. There were a lot of 17, 18-year-olds, and they were trigger-happy, probably nervous, and when faced by aggressive civilians who were antagonistic to what they were doing, they were quite aggressive in their response. Some of the civilian deaths appeared to make no sense and were quite brutal. It's clear that some members of the Citizen Army were quite trigger-happy, and a number of the civilian deaths were without any justification whatsoever.
Who shot this man?
I shot him. He refused to leave, so I shot him.
Commandant Mallin, I've sent a detail of men to take over the bank, and I've set O'Leary and Doyle as snipers. But we don't have enough men to take the Shelburne and the college.
The college is the stronger fallback position. Occupy the college now. When more men arrive, we'll organise a party to occupy the Shelburne.
Yes, sir.
Is tóca go córa go mé cartfa cúicé daoine ann ach ní rá. Ní rá acha céad fiche na céad trucha fear agus maná ag a féin. So, cá raibh an plan B. Agus is umí duine a deireann gur dhéann sé praseach de, cén fánar ghlach sé leis an Auslan Shelburne me hampla. Conas éiteach sé. Ní rá, go leor fir an Shelburne bheith trucha dahad chuig a duine, a tastalhaid chun sin a ghlacha agus é chamad.
Stoi gres ag Mallin ó hús gur job an Zachar a bhí ribh, bhí sta gira fathe mhór oscailsa a chuineáil a bhí timpplaí ag furigintí arda ó na bhéideach an áidionsaí dhéanarab agus sin é a tharla.
The British Army began to move stealthily towards the Shelburne Hotel. They entered the hotel and they set up machine gun nests at the top of the hotel, and they also installed snipers. So when they attacked early on Tuesday morning, the machine gunners and snipers had a perfect view over the park. Mallin's men were put under serious pressure, and he eventually had to order the abandonment of Stephen's Green.
There were not as many casualties as may have been expected. The women left first, entered the College of Surgeons, then the men were sent again then afterwards, and Mallin was one of the last to leave.
Gurtaíoch fear amháin agus bhí Mallin rith amach. A fiúháin granna machine gun ag cathal leis sin agus é haring isteach. So bhí sé cró go freisin ag deirigh leis gacéine ó thuir tres na slán an son.
Mr. Mallin, forgive me. I couldn't deliver your message to the GPO.
Thank you. I appreciate your efforts.
Bhí aran na Breataine is sealamh go leor gona furigin sí éagsúil an acaleob agus bhí siad a scaoile lob go tréin. Rinne Mallin coppla íireacht brise amachas. Chur sé daoine gur a ionsaí a dhéanamh ar na furiginsaí a rair na Breataine iontab ach ní raire le aon cheann gona honsaí sin I gharíre.
Certainly towards the end of the week, by Thursday, communication had ceased with all the other posts as the British Army were able to cordon off the areas where the rebels were stationed. And information was cut off. They very much, things had quietened down to a large extent in their area as well.
Agus is cosúil go Dearna Mallin chomag sa béidir a charíre bhí sé sáiníon áit nar bhéidir mór an na dhéanna. Agus faoi dhearan na seachtainna bhí sé smaoinú ar bhealach é cinnteile. Ach ar nó tháinig an Gaeile an sin agus a chuir sé sin zéire leis an éirí amach.
I have here a dispatch from headquarters. In order to prevent the further slaughter of Dublin citizens and in the hope of saving the lives of our followers, now surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered, the members of the provisional government present at headquarters have agreed to an unconditional surrender. And the commandants of the various districts in the city and country will order their commands to lay down arms. It is signed by the President of the Provisional Government, P.H. Pearce, and counter-signed by the Commandant of the Dublin Brigade, Mr. James Connolly.
A minority of the Citizen Army volunteers in Stephen's Green in the Royal College of Surgeons wanted to continue, but Mallin felt that as a soldier he should follow orders.
We have fought this fight as soldiers, so we must surrender as soldiers.
We should fight them to the hills, like we planned.
There was quite a degree of disappointment. There was a lot of emotion in the Royal College of Surgeons on hearing of the surrender, and it was very difficult for most people present.
Tránóna dé Downig an trochu lád a bhí abrán, Thróigh Mallin an garastún amach as coláist a riagan na máin liachta, agus ghéil siad. Tugad na rebelúnathe go dtí Barrack Richmond, áit ar anamníag Mallin mar chuine de cheannarí an éirí amach, agus chuir a cuairtmhíleata ar an gúige lá de bhí bealtainna.
You, get up. Go to the back of the hall.
He was anxious, clearly, to save his own life. There's no question about that. He did not relish the possibility of a glorious death, of a sacrifice for the cause. He wanted to live, and he did his best to avoid execution.
I had no commission whatever in the Citizens' Army. I had verbal instructions from James Connolly to take 36 men to St. Stephen's Green and to report to the volunteer officer there. Shortly after my arrival, the firing started, and the Countess of Markievicz ordered me to take command of the men, as I had been so long associated with them.
And in fact, it could be said that he endangered Countess Markiewicz's life, because he quite clearly pointed to her as his commanding officer.
Bhíos ag a gágurfií chun báise go bhág fí a bhean agus carrot linne aice agus leanamhil ar a mealach agus go bhach saoil tragóideach ach a béidir. Bhí sé gira a bheithe a hábháil.
My darling wife, pulse of my heart. This is the end of all things earthly. Sentence of death has been passed, and tomorrow the sentence will be carried out by shooting. And so must Irish men pay for trying to make Ireland a free nation. God's will be done. I am prepared, but oh, if only you and the little ones were coming too, we could all reach heaven together. My heartstrings are torn to pieces when I think of you and them.
Mallin was visited in a cell in Kilmainham by his wife Agnes, who was heavily pregnant at this time, his 4 young children, his mother, his brother Bart and his sister Katie. His son describes coming in to see his father.
Na honnig sé an tahar sin agus just dúirt ní eici mé mar ahar rí sin bus the cur of Weimar agus viidir rá Padracha on viidir agus just to be mar ahar gol, you know. Ní rud ar ná éon eile dhéanamh just sláán rá an ahar agus bin sin agus dúirt an tahar leis le Agnes le na bhean céile bhfuilm go rathach my little man Joseph mar Sagadórat agus úna mar ban rialta.
A husband's blessing on your dear head, my loving wife. A father's blessing on the heads of my children. James, John, Una, Joseph, my little man, my little man, my little man.
The minstrel boy to the war is gone. In the ranks of death you will find him.
Prisoner, about turn.
I do not believe our blood has been shed in vain. I believe Ireland will come out greater and grander. But she must not forget she is Catholic. She must keep her faith. I find no fault with the soldiers or police. I forgive them from the bottom of my heart. Pray for all the souls who fell in this fight, Irish and English. Goodbye, my wife, my darling. Your loving husband, Michael Mallin, Commandant, Stephen's Green Command.
Land of song, said the warrior bard. Though all the world betrayed thee.
Lord Jesus, receive my spirit!